Welcome back to part 10 of our Photoshop class. My name is Arnold Faller, and in lesson 10, which is called Changing Hue, we're going to do some quite sophisticated changes to images. So if you have made it all the way to lesson 10, congratulations. Stay tuned, we're going to have more coming up. So let's start with explaining the title a little bit better. And I'm going to open a really colorful image to show you what the term hue means. Right now we have, when we talked about colors, and I'm going to open the foreground color picker here from Photoshop, the color described by its red, green and blue channel was most of the time the most common thing to do. So we had an RGB image, a JPEG RGB 8-bit, so we knew that every part red, green and blue was defined with 256 different shades. Now the colors in this color space can also be described by their hue, saturation, and brightness or lightness, or sometimes called value. So if we switch to HS and B up here, we can see that the first one, the hue, is actually the actual color that we use by using the color wheel and extending it to a linear line. So when it starts at one point, you can see that the number goes all the way from 0 to 360. So it's actually a 360-degree angle of the color wheel. So it kind of continues here. The red is the same red as here at the very bottom. The next thing is, let's pick this red here. The next thing is saturation. Saturation is like how much color of every hue is used. So from a grayscale image to a fully colored image, usually 100%. So there's 100 different stages of saturation. And the brightness or the lightness is how bright and how dark those pixels are. So from the brightest possible red to the pure black, because then it's the darkest possible red, which is black. So describing the colors with hue, saturation and lightness or brightness is another way to describe the color world. And today we're going to take a look at colors under this point, because this is quite a helpful tool if we want to change colors in our images. And the first thing is, you've maybe noticed under image adjustments, there is an adjustment for hue and saturation. As always, I am begging you, do never use those adjustments here, because if I apply an adjustment, doesn't matter if it's a background or a regular layer, let's just unlock it in a regular layer. If you apply an adjustment to a layer like this, and then you do something to it, I don't know what, take away the color, it's not possible to change those later on. So once you hit OK, it is changed in the image, and you cannot go back, of course, unless undo. But if you save it in the meantime, you will never be able to change those values. That's why we're not going to do that. I'm going to use undo. When we want to place an adjustment for hue and saturation to our image, we either do it by turning this layer into a smart object. So that would be selecting the layer, right-click, and convert to smart object, because when it's a smart object and then we apply the image adjustments, hue and saturation, and let's do something. Let's move the hue without I'm going to explain how to work with this. I'm just doing any change. When you hit OK, you will see that the hue and saturation just pops up underneath the layer, and you can anytime just click on it, double click on it, and it will come up with the same value, and you can change those to a different setting. It's okay. So possible to change it, and of course you can turn it on and off, the change, and you can also mask it, but we'll do that later in a different way. Okay, so that is one way, and you can also remove it by simply taking the effect and pull it onto the recycle bin. So smart object is one way. The other way, of course, much better one, it looks a little different, but it's the same thing, to use an adjustment layer for adjusting hue and saturation. So whatever layer it is, background or regular layer, you can always place an adjustment layer on top. So here is the adjustment layer, and there's almost all of them that you also got here under image adjustment you can find here. And here is hue and saturation. So it will be placed on top of the layer. I already mentioned that. You can decide whether the adjustment is affecting all layers below, that is now, or just one layer below. This is the switch here, and you can always go back to those adjustments. So let's see what we can actually do in the hue and saturation adjustment. So the first thing is the hue. You can do it by hand. Simply, if one color, for example, is a reddish color, and you switch the hue into one direction, let's say you go from red to the left, so my red would be somewhere here, and you move it a little bit to the left, you can see that all the reds will be shifted to the left, and then they end up being purple. And if you go much further, then you will anytime hit blue. So when you have been here red before, now you're blue. So you can see it down here. Whatever was red before is now blue. Whatever was green before, is there green? Yes, there was some green here. Some greens is now in the red hue, and so on. So you're just shifting it by moving this hue shifter here. The next thing is, let's leave it somewhere where it was. The next thing is saturation. So you can like take away some of the color, desaturate it all the way to the end, and you will have a grayscale image. And if you increase it, then it will get those freaky colors, and all the colors will be very strong. And the other way is, of course, every single pixel can be made darker and brighter. Of course, all the way from a very bright image, a very dark, where it's all black, then all the way up to a light, very light pixel that is white. So changing the lightness, changing the saturation, or the hue. Also, what you can do is you can colorize the whole image, and that means when you hit the button for colorize, it basically means that every pixel now, this is a grayscale image, but not from white to black, but from white to a certain color tone, and this tone would be somewhere in the greens right now. So if I am now colorizing it and I pick a certain blue, then all the pixels in the image will be anywhere from white to a very dark version of this blue. So it's kind of in this world, this grayscale world where between the white and the color. Of course, it can be more or less saturated. So if it has a very strong blue colors and also can make it darker, then there's more of the dark pixels, and here's more of the lighter pixels. So that it will be colorize. If you turn that off. And the last thing, and that is now you can very selectively pick certain colors out of your color palette on your image and change it. There's two ways to do this. The first one, very intuitive, is that you use the hand up here. So when you click on the hand here and then hold your mouse on a certain color, let's say I'll go for the red egg here, and now you click and drag left and right. You can see I can change the saturation only for this color, only for the reds. Here's a list that you can see. It can find the yellows, the reds, the greens, the cyans, blues, and magentas, and so on. So hold your mouse on it when you're in the hand, click and drag left and right. That will desaturate or saturate a certain color thing, a certain color here. If the reds or greens or yellows are not too precise for you, you can also, let's bring that all back to 0. Oops, sorry. So somewhere around 0. You can also change the without using the hand. You can, instead of using a certain color, so you can start with, let's say, the blues, and now you can see down here those 4 marks. Those 4 marks mean between the 2 marks in the middle, those are the colors that will be affected the most. So these are the blues that will be affected the most. And then the degree of affection slowly falls off So it means somewhere here where it's only purple, it will not be affected. Affected by whatever you do, either change of lightness, switch in Hue, or did it work? Blues. Yeah, that's just a very small, there's only a blue egg up here in this one, that's why it didn't show up. So a change of hue, so you can move, for example, you can select the only blue egg, that was the blues, and turn it green. That of course, here is the effect. Always make sure that there's some distance between, so it's not too hard change there. Okay, or try something else. Let's find those orange eggs. You can also go for a preset first, go for the yellows and then adjust it so it's a little bit more orange. So I'm going to bring those a little bit away from the green and yellow. So like this. Now we have the orange here in this area, and now we're going to take the orange and move them all towards a green, but a darker green. So like this, huh? See, now I have selected all the oranges and turned them into the greens with this area. Okay, so this is how you can affect only certain colors. When you're done, you can go back to those master changes. Again, this change can be turned on and off. You can anytime go back and change those values, and you can also mask it. So when you use a brush, for example, and you have a brush, a little larger brush, and you paint in black, then you can paint an area, and the area will not be affected by the hue and saturation change. Okay, so with this technique, we are going to go into the next exercise or the next example, and that is now what if we want to change certain colors, and I would like to go into a different example, and I just googled a couple of shirts here on the internet. So here's the first one, and the first task is a pretty simple one. I would like to change the color of the blue blouse or shirt. So change any color into any color. And that is the same way, works the same way that we did before with our eggs. The question is only, are there any other colors in the picture or not? In this case, we don't have mostly blue. There's really the only thing that is blue. So we don't even have to create a mask for our blue areas. If there would be another blue that you don't want to change, or a very similar blue, then maybe you want to create a mask that masks out everything else. But before, for this example, we just try it without a mask. So all you need to do is place an hue and saturation adjustment layer on top. Hue and saturation. Now, is it blue, or is it's probably more on the cyan area? So you either use switch from master to cyan, you can use your finger, in this case I'm going to do it this way, and now adjust the area here in with those 4 bars. I guess that we want a little less of the greens and a little bit more of the darker blues, because see, in the shadow area this is pretty dark blue, but in the bright areas it is almost goes towards the greenish thing. So let's do it this way and adjust it. So, and the next thing is you just want to switch the hue into something else. So I don't know where we want to go. Let's go for a red or bright purple, maybe a little bit less saturated, a little bit more brightness. So you can see that with this technique, you simply turn all the pixels that were blue into a different color. If you don't, if you also have some other blues that you don't want to change in the color, then you obviously have to create a mask. So that is, I'm going to turn off the effect for a minute. To create a mask that is pretty simple, in this case we can either use a color select, but I would suggest to do a really quick mask and therefore use, for example, the quick selection tool. Use the quick selection tool, and then you start anywhere on the shirt and paint, and it will select similar blues. Then we go down here to the things that are hanging down, the sleeves, and over here. Then I would zoom in to, let's say, 100%, for example, and check how we're doing on the details. There is maybe a bit, yeah, you see that you can either add or subtract a bit more, but we're quite good here. Also going down, and also the sleeve here. Okay, so that would be a quick and simple mask with the quick selection tool. And now with the area selected, I'm totally ignoring what I did so far, so I'm going to do a new color change. With the area selected, I'm going to create another Hue and Saturation adjustment layer. And now it takes the selection into the mask. So here's my masking area, and it will perfectly mask it. So now I don't have to take care so much which areas I'm going to change, because now I have all the blues selected in my selection. So now I don't need to pick greens or blues or so on. I just can change the hue, and it will automatically switch it. You can see right away what the problem is. Let's make it a little darker and more saturated. You can see right away if the mask is not very precise somewhere, for example here at the shirt, then this remains blue. Here. So we have to go into the mask, and the good thing is, in this example, we don't have any hair interfering with the shirt, but as soon as the hair is in front of the shirt, this is be really hard to do all the selection mask. So here's the mask. White on the mask shows the effect, and black not. So I'm going to use a brush tool, of course, a little a smaller brush with soft edges. So here it is. And I am going to paint foreground color in white, because I want to also show the effect there. Right now I am in flow of 36. That means like only 36%. I have to like paint a few times over it, to have it 100%. Or I can also take the flow up to 100, and I only have to paint over the pixels once. So let's quickly do this, fix the mask. You also notice that from my selection, so like this. Let me turn off the effect for a minute. Here I am in one, let's go for 200%. Here you can see that the shirt has a little edge around before the skin starts, and it is skin color, and here's the shirt color, and here is something mixture between the blend between the shirt and the skin color. And you can also see, unfortunately, there are some mistakes in there. If I zoom in, that come from the JPEG compression. It was saved as a JPEG, and I already mentioned that the JPEG always carries out some pixels because it's compressing in little squares, and you can still see those compression squares here in the diagonal lines. And you can also see that there is some blue out here and some skin tone inside. So if you have a selection that defines which areas are color changed, you will always end up with a slight, in this case, blue edge, because those colors are not affected, because only till the edge of the selection. You have to refine your selection to include that. On the other hand, when I use the version that just takes any color, I have less of an effect there. I have these light blue things. If I want to include them, I can always include them better in, where's my blues? Yes, like this. I would need a little bit more of the greenish areas. Yeah. Okay, so that's just a detail thing. Good. that's so much for the first part. If you want to change the color of any color into any other color. Why am I saying this? Because it is much simpler to change any color into any other color than changing white into any color. So the next thing will be, we're going to change white into any other color, and the change of colors will be, okay, let's open another image quickly. So changing white into, I have two white shirts here. First I picked a white shirt, you can see it here, that is easy to select. So in case we need to do a selection around the white shirt, it is much simpler when you have a slightly black background. But then I found out that this shirt, not the shirt itself, but the picture of the shirt has almost no contrast on it. So there's hardly any gray areas and something shadows on it. So I decided not to take this one and take another shirt that has a few more of those shadows. So it's not purely white, it also has some gray parts on it, and it will make it much nicer once we bring some color into it. So the next thing is now white, turning white into any shirt works slightly different. But you also need, you first of all need a selection, because you cannot choose any white, because they will also change the background. So how do we get a quick selection of our shirt? Again, we can anytime refine it later on. Let's zoom in to, let's see, 100%. The hardest part will be here, and maybe the fingers and so on. So let's also try the quick selection tool. And I'm starting to paint, and you will soon see that the hand will also be included. I have to subtract that. Okay, so here it is. I have included the background. With Alt-click on the background, I can remove the background. That's good. Here, Alt-click on the hand removes the hand. I'm not gonna go into details there. Here's also the hand included, so let's remove the hand as well. Also this in the middle. Hand is removed. Legs are good. I'm gonna add the part here of the shirt, and I'll do a little bit more details on the fingers. So I'm gonna add again something to the selection. Maybe this time with a smaller brush, and I just paint. Oh, sorry, this is the selected part. I have to subtract it, of course. We want the white at the end. So that's good. Yeah, and okay, the rest of the detail we have to paint by hand. Where's there? What is this here? Let's remove that as well. So, and add this. Good. Here we are, and we have a rough selection of the shirt. So now, how do we colorize the white shirt? Basically, not by using a hue and saturation, but we're going to use an adjustment layer, and this time we're going to use a solid color. So I'm going to use a solid color adjustment layer, and the solid color I can just pick however I want it. So let's go for, why not, green. A green shirt. So here's the green color. I'm using a solid green color. Looks awful. Looks just like cut out or something like this. But the secret here is that you have to choose a different blend mode. So you want the solid color to blend with the layer underneath, with the background layer. And I personally, there's a lot of those layers that do kind of things that are, I don't know how exactly what they do, but let's try some. And for the white shirt thing, usually multiply works best, because multiply works really good with very bright layers, because it's usually just darkening those bright layers. On the other hand, I personally think that no, that's good. Let's go for the multiply, as long as it's a color that is not too dark. So we're not talking about turning a white shirt into a black shirt. We want to turn a white shirt into any color, and then usually multiply is the best way. So we're going to play the multiply. You can, of course, anytime take the green color and click on the green thing, and you can adjust it somehow. So you can make it brighter, darker, or any other color. And you can also adjust the opacity if it's a little too much and you want a lighter, you know, a very light color here. So let's keep a strong color. And now there's only one thing, maybe the shirt, and of course then you would go into details, go into the mask, paint away all the little details so that it looks fine. We don't need to show you that right now. Also the hair needs to be excluded and so on, and those edges fixed. And if you want to get more details into the shirt, you can anytime place, for example, a curve on top of it. So if I place a curve layer, a curve adjustment layer on top of it, again, the curve, I usually use the curves whenever I want to darken something or to brighten something. You can either brighten the whole image, but in this case, I would just brighten or darken one layer below. So you're just darkening the green. So here's the green getting brighter, getting darker, or you can also play a little bit with the contrast thing and get an S curve into it. Or what you can do is, instead of having those on RGB, that means on all colors, you can also use the hand here. So if I say the hand there and I hold my eyedrop tool in the darkest areas of the shirts, which I guess are here, click here, and then I can darken and brighten especially this area. Or let's go for a brighter area. I guess the brightest would be here, and brighten it, for example. Okay, so that is one thing that you can do. You can also limit the effect of the curve only to certain areas. Let me show you. I'm going to do something a little bit more extreme. I'm going to take the curves and make it really dark. So I'm darkening the thing really strong. And now if you take the curve adjustment layer and you double click somewhere here in this area, it opens up the layer style or layer options and also blending options. And you can see right now it darkens the whole underlying layer. Here it says underlying layer. But now you can move this part and you can define which part of the layer will be affected. So will be excluded. Sorry, is it only darkening the brighter parts, or is it only darkening the darker ones? So when you move this, you see at a certain point it will just jump because it is only one green. But what you can do is you can use your Alt key on the keyboard to get those two things apart. So let me get them together. If I move it like this, you will see it will jump from either applying the curve or not, because as soon as we are above, it will not apply it. So what you need, you find the spot where it's jumping, and then you use your Alt key and get those two separated. So you separate them a little bit, and now it is like it's slowly. So it has full effect here, it has no effect here, and the effect slowly falls off. So basically, you can limit the area of the effect. So, and this is how you get, let's get okay, and before and after, you can see something like this. Or you can also place another curve on top. This time we are brightening up a lot. Again, doing a double click here, only this time we're trying to use exclude. No, I'm brightening up, so I would like to exclude the dark ones actually. I did it the other way around. When I darkened it, I should have included. So when I brighten it up, I don't want to brighten up the dark areas too much. And when I darken it, which was the first one, I actually would like to try it this way. Be better. Where's the effect? Oh, it's off. Okay, so you get the point. You can add different curves onto your solid layer here. Okay, so that was how you fill any color, how you turn any color into, how do you turn white into any color. If you now want to go from green to any other color, you can either change your solid fill here into any other color, or as we did before, as we now have a color, and we also have a mask that masks it out. So I'm going to use a control click on the mask, which turns the mask into a selection. Again, it's still not perfect. And now I'm going to add another hue and saturation on top. And now I could, of course, change the hue if you need different color versions there. So once you bring color into the white shirt and adjust the highlights and so on and get some contrast into it, you can anytime use a regular hue and saturation to change the color. Okay, and one more thing, and the last thing, and I found out when this is the last thing, is again the same shirt. When you want to turn a white shirt into a black shirt, so no color, then you would probably say, yeah, then I just need a dark solid. Yes, but there's a few things that you might want to change, especially the blend mode and also the color. So let's do again, oh, I shouldn't have thrown it away. Let's do again a quick selection of the shirt. Sorry, I should have done that before. So here's the, then we don't want this, we don't want the arm. Good, we don't want this. Okay, good enough. The fingers is, so here's the selection. And now what you want to do is you want to place a solid color again. But this time take of course, no color, but take a black color. But do not take total black. Make sure you use something like probably 15% black or so all the that is good. 15% black, so it should be a dark gray. And now let's have a look. It's still next thing is the blend mode thing. Now I found out when you use the same blend mode as in your color images, you will lose all the details of the shirt, of the shadows and so on. Let me quickly fix that. So in the shadow here, I'm going to use a brush X, so that at least the fingers are a little bit better visible. And here's also the hair. Good. And that is like this. Good. So if you use multiply, you will get of course a black shirt, but it looks really pitch black and it doesn't have all the highlights of the shirt on it. So I think in this case to use the linear light works much better. Look at this. If you place the linear light, you almost got the like a Satin shine quality to it. So the bright areas and the dark areas really pop up. You can with the linear light, you can also try to go for your solid and try to make it even darker, so it will still look good when it's almost black. Of course, black does not work, so you need a little light, so you can define with the color of your solid almost perfectly how the black shirt's quality to light is, how much it shines and so on. So that is the difference between turning it into a black shirt and into a white shirt. The same thing, you can again place a curve on top that kind of, for example, the curve on top that brightens some areas, and then you can go in here and say, but I don't want to brighten the dark areas, I just want to brighten the brighter ones. See, that just takes the bright ones and makes them slightly brighter. Okay, so that is the big difference. The black color, I think, works better when it's in linear light. So on a white shirt, if you turn a white shirt black, if you turn a colored shirt black, you have to try it, and it's probably, it works better with multiply. Okay, so far that's for the hue and saturation on different colors and how you can change them. Here's one more thing into the combination of hue with pictures. If you have a regular landscape picture, I already used that before from Dubrovnik. So here's a regular picture, and if you want to make the colors pop out, you might come up with the idea that you could place a simple hue and saturation adjustment layer on it. I've done that probably a couple times, but you notice when you increase the saturation, I'm going really all the way up, then you can see that it saturates all the pixels the same amount. So it takes every pixel and makes it more saturated, and that's why we got in all kinds of area, we got these freakish colors because they're not supposed to be so saturated. So what you want to do is, let's get that away. What you want to do is you want to use a concept that's called saturation masks. So basically the concept is you look at the picture and you somehow have to find out where are my pixels already saturated and where are they not saturated. Okay? So you want to find out where is a lot of saturation in it and where is no saturation in it. That's a pretty simple way to do that. First, you need a copy of your layer. This time not because you want to destroy it, because you are destroying it actually, because the copy will then later on delete it. So you do a right click and duplicate my layer. I'm going to turn the other one off so we're not accidentally looking at it. So here's my copy. And this is a regular copy of the layer. Every pixel here has 3 values, red, green, and blue. We know that when you look at the channels, we can see that these channels show the amount of red, the amount of green, and the amount of blue for every pixel, okay, in channels. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take those colors, which are red, green, and blue, and turn them into the color world of hue, saturation, and value. But not not a simple way, because every color can be translated into the same thing. There is a filter to do this, and the filter, make sure you're on the copy, the filter is here under Other, and here it is, HSB HSL. This filter has an input, right now RGB, we have all kinds of RGB pixels, and we want to export, or we want to turn it into an HSL. So hue, saturation, and luminance levels, brightness. So there's not much of a difference whatever you choose here. If you hit OK, it will look weird. That is strange. Why? Because from this weird colored image here, if you now take a look at the channels, the 3 channels, still called red, green, blue, by the way, these 3 channels now represent the hue, the saturation, and the lightness. So for example, if you take a look at the blue value, you have a perfect grayscale image, because a grayscale image just represents, is a pixel dark or is a pixel bright. So that is a usual black and white image. The green layer tells me where are the saturated pixels and where are the not saturated pixels. By the way, white means saturated and black means not so saturated. And the first one, which is totally weird colors, is the hue. Remember, the hue is this color ring that is made into a stripe, the rainbow kind of thing. And it will tell you from which color it is made of. So we cannot do anything with this one. We can use the blue channel to use it as a grayscale image, but the green channel is important, because the green channel tells us where are we saturated and where not. So let's copy this. To copy it, we could either go for select all, Control A, and then Control C for copy, but it's much easier to click on the channel with pressing the Control key. When you use Control and you click on the channel, it will copy the channel into a selection. The selection is still active. You can see it here. Now, with the selection still active, I'm going to delete the layer. I don't need it anymore. Now I am in my regular layer, still having the selection active. And now I'm going to give the image an adjustment, hue and saturation adjustment layer. You know, when anything is selected, the adjustment layer will mask it. And now see, we have the mask that we've seen before in the green channel here in our hue and saturation layer. And now, if we apply a change to it, for example, more saturation, it will only give more saturations to the pixels that are already saturated. And if you bring it up all the way to 100, you can see that suddenly the colors of your image, they just pop out. Because, here, before, after. Because it just takes the one that are really nicely saturated and gives them more saturation. If you don't use this mask here, you can just use it shift and click. You can see that the saturation that strong will give you a freakish image. But with the mask here, this is the saturation mask. Okay, so one more time in a quick recap, how did I do it? I copied my layer. So here's it, duplicated my layer. I gave the new layer a filter, other HSB, HSL. I turned the RGB into an HSL. Then I went into the 3 channels. The middle one, HSB, hue, saturation, and brightness. So I take the saturation one in the middle, control, click on the layer, turns it into a selection. Then you go to your layer. I'm going to turn this one off, turn this one background here, and with the selection on, I'm going to give it a color, a hue and saturation value, where I pop up the saturation with this mask on it. Okay, that is a nice effect that you can play with almost any image just to enhance its colors. By the way, this is also something that you can take into turn into an action. That means you automate it, that you don't have to do it all by hand. You can automate Photoshop, but we're going to do automated actions in Photoshop a little bit later. Okay, and the tutorial already got quite long, but I got one more thing on my mind when it comes to hue and playing with colors, and that is maybe a tutorial that you also have seen many times on the internet. Again, every single one of those tutorials I'm sure you find really extensively also on other channels. I just wanted to combine a couple things. The next thing is, when we talked about those solid color channels and so on, it works slightly different when the task is to colorize a black and white image. And what I did here is I just Googled for a picture that is actually, it was marked as free to use, and it was black and white. So I just said, went for this image, just Google any image, black and white image, sorry, grayscale image. It's referred to as black and white. And what you need to in order to colorize it, you also need a reference image, another image that has a similar color tone, lightness tone that you want to use. So it makes no sense to take a picture of an old man if you want to colorize something like this. And it's also a very high key studio photography. High key means like everything is in very brightness, there are no hard shadows on it. So you want to have a reference image that also has the same brightness or the same colors. And let me quickly get one of those. Here is an image that I pulled it in. I pulled it in the same image because I just want to have a look at it, and later on I just kick out the layer. There was also another image that when I turned off black and white, I got the same image. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to take a look at your reference image, and what you want to pick 4 different skin colors. So from the brightness, from the brightest areas, let me zoom in into the picture. From the brightest areas of your skin to the not to the dark, not the all black, but to the darkest somewhere here on the skin. And then you try to find 4 steps of those colors and put them on an extra layer. So I'm going to add another extra layer here, and it is important when you use your eyedrop tool, the picking tool, that you set it to a 5x5 average. If you have it to point sample, it means, let me zoom in quickly. Oh, sorry. When you zoom in, you can see, of course, that sometimes there is one pixel that is a little bit darker because there's something on the skin and so on, but here you get the point. If you accidentally pick the darker one and not all the average around, it will give you the wrong color. So that's why we choose the picker for 5x5 average. So whenever you click somewhere, it will take a 5x5 pixel area and finds the average color for this area. Okay, so I am on my new layer. I am here in pixel. I am sampling all layers. That's also important because otherwise I would only sample my own layer and so on. So make sure you have all layers on and you have a 5x5 average. We need it later on again. So here it is, and I'm gonna select the brightest area first. That is here, the shiny on the forehead. And now I go for a brush, and on my new layer, I'm going to paint. Let me get a hard-edged brush, a little bit larger. I'm going to paint a little color sample there. Now, again, I use the picking, and now I pick the dark area of the skin and paint with my brush the dark areas here. Now I find the two steps in between. So the one step would be, I guess, if this was the darkest part, so then it's a little bit brighter here. And maybe the chin is the next one here. Yeah, that's good. So I got 4 different skin colors, almost very bright, and this is quite dark here. Good. My color picture is no longer necessary, so I can also delete it. There it is. Here's my extra layer. I'm going to put it to the side with my little color sample. So now we're going to place the color on top, but this time, like when we color the shirt and so on, we are not going to use a solid color to place it on top to colorize it, but we use a gradient. So we're going to use a gradient map. I'm going to place an adjustment layer, gradient map. Okay, the gradient map, make sure you click on the adjustment because we want to adjust the gradient map. Don't be in the mask, be in the gradient map. And now up here, click on this gradient. Right now we have a gradient going from white, probably the last 2 colors that I have picked or so. So here's our color gradient, a very bright one. If you want to have certain colors before, like we did Colorize, we can just use white to blue, and then we get a grayscale image in the color of blue. But for this case, we're going to take now the brightest color here, click on this little icon there, and when you move into the image, because we're still here in the picker, if you're not in the picker, you need to click on this color icon and then pick. Okay, if you are in the picker as me, you just need to click here and then pick your darkest color. Sorry, what did I just mess up? I've just made everything colorized it. Good. You know what? Before I mess it up, one more. Here's the. Let's do a quick mask, because the mask, the gradient ramp obviously only will be placed on the face. So let's get a quick mask here on the background. I'm using the same quick selection tool. Yeah, that's everything, and then I subtract the white parts there. So, also maybe the hair. Later on, we'll also we can also subtract the lips if you want, and the eyes. But we're gonna do that later anyway. Precisely. Good. So here's a quick mask selection, and by clicking on the gradient map, I just switch the colors here, and I hit delete. Oh, that's the other way around, sorry. Control I inverts the mask. There it is. What is? Sorry. Now, there it is. Looks awful. Oh, I forgot the area. Good. So now here it is. Here's my mask plate. Let's go back to the gradient. Let's click here on the gradient. Click on the gradient ramp. First color is this one. So click here. Color. Pick. Okay. Then this guy. Color. Pick. We're getting there. And now we also need two in between, so just click anywhere to place two more colors. Click on it, then color, pick the darker one, okay, and this one, color, pick the brighter one. Okay, so now we got our 4 colors in here, in the gradient. We can still play if I want more from the dark one, and just a few the most shiny parts here, so you can switch those around. But this looks awful. Why? Because the gradient, of course, is in blending mode normal. And for colorizing photography, we could use multiply. But again, if it is grayish and you put multiply on top, it's getting generally darker. So if we want to use the gradient map here to colorize it only, then you should use color down here. So we tried linear light. In this case, it doesn't work. Color works quite well for this. So you're applying the blending mode for the gradient map in color. Again, you can also change the opacity later on if you want more towards a grayscale. Okay, so there it is, and that already looks quite well. Let's fix the mask a bit, so the mask looks a little bit scary there. The mask, and then we're going to use a brush. I'm going to use more, get rid of some of the. Let's take a rounder brush and get rid of some of the hair there. You later on also need a reference for the hair color, and you can do the same thing. Get the bright areas of the hair and the dark areas. That would be best if you also pick it out of your reference. The skin tone for the lips, you can actually do in a similar way than we did the shirt before. So let's get this quickly done. So just include that in the mask as well, so that we have the neck and also in the color. Good. So I'm not going to spend too much details there. So when you want to do the lips, and we don't need our reference anymore. If you want to do the lips, the thing is, and again I'm doing it really quick. The lips will also be done in. That will look awful, I know already. Here's a quick mask. You're going to place a solid color for the lips on top of it. Of course, you pick whatever lip color that you want. A lipstick color that you want. And then you adjust your mask. Zoom in 100% or maybe more, and then brush your mask. So we're painting in white in order to get this included, and here it will be. So again, there's also tutorials that show you how to do the lips. So there it is. Now, which blending mode is best for I guess it's again multiply or color, but color in this case will light it up pretty much. Let's go for multiply and now do something. For example, this color, the dark color that I used, this is the darkest red here, I'm only going to apply it to the darkest parts of the lips. So therefore, I'm going to double click here on the right side. And again, when you use the underlying layer and you want to only apply it to the darkest parts, you have to exclude the brighter parts. So take the brighter parts, move it here, and then with Alt separate those to make it not as strong. And that means now my lip color is only applied to the darker parts. So then I take my lip color filling, duplicate it. Let's call it, let's name it brighter parts, bright lips, and bright lips, yes. So this is the darker color for the lips, then I use the brighter lips, then I take the same red and just use a brighter version of it, of this almost the same red. And now I change the blend if mode that I exclude the dark ones. So it means I get this right and I exclude the dark areas because the dark will be influenced by the other one. So this, and then with Alt move it apart and so on. So you can use two or three different layers and maybe also get the highlights even when you put this on top. One on top, you can even get highlights there. So the brightest parts will be then like this. The color for the brightest one, but also saturation almost white. And here, I'm excluding. Yeah, that was also almost for the. Yeah. Okay, so that was, you can play with different layers for the for your lips. Very dark. I should have started with a brighter color, or we can use less of a opacity. Good. And the last thing is another technique for the eyes. Of course, you can spend a lot of details and painting in the eyes. And again, there's tutorials of how to do how to do the eyes in a really sophisticated way. Right now, we just want to do a quick put a highlight color into the eyes. And I think the fastest way would be just to use a new layer. Set your foreground color to whatever color you want to use on your eyes. So I'm going for a green, very almost emerald green eyes. Then I would just take a brush, make the brush eye size. So I'm going to increase the size so that it actually fits the eyes. Yes, just paint over them. Like this. Then you give the layer a mask, and on the mask you remove the parts that you are not using. Again, I'm doing it really quickly. So just remove the parts that you don't use. And then you find the correct blend mode. So try multiply, but that darkens it a lot. In this case, you can use again the vivid light. In this case usually works quite well, but it depends on how dark the photography is. If it's a very bright eyes, then you might want to use a different blend mode. And of course also color in this case works quite well. Once you set the color tone, then you want to move in and adjust your mask one more time, because there is, oops, so brush, then there's green on my eyes up there, and so on. So the masks need to be a little bit more carefully chosen. And when you're done, then you can always adjust the opacity and take the green down a little bit. Okay, so the lips are not the best parts, but the rest turned out quite well. Okay, so that was an idea of how to colorize a black and white photography. So that was a lot of tools to play with hue, saturation, and lightness. So the adjustment layer itself, then we did the example with colorizing the shirts and so on. I show you the really important thing of using a saturation mask in order to make the colors pop out, and then at the end we did one more time. So all the things basically came up to using different adjustment layers, or also adjustment solids and adjustment gradient maps. We used mask extensively to limit the area where the effect is going, and we played with the hue and saturation, the blend modes, of course, of the different layers. Okay, guys, that's it. Thanks for your attention, and I'll see you in the next one.